Hello and welcome to another edition of Betfair's AFL Trade Talk. I'm joined by Darren Parkin. We're going to talk about some of the big events that happened last weekend and look at some of the Betfair exchange markets. But Daz, it was another big weekend of footy.
Yeah, and a huge weekend in the finals movements as well. Obviously, there's a few games we're going to touch on, but Sydney keep themselves alive. The Bulldogs cop a bit of a blow to their chances. Adelaide, a big blow. The Giants still alive. Carlton throwing the cat right amongst the pigeons, and obviously Melbourne's extraordinary effort over Brisbane, almost shutting the top four race.
Carlton were the big firmers in the top 8 market. We're going to talk about some of the games last week. Let's kick it off with the Swans and the Dogs. The Swans hit $1.66 pre-play, and I know in last week's episode I said that they were the lay of the century. I kind of still stand by that. I mean, it would have been good if they actually lost.
An important prerequisite.
An important prerequisite. But they did drift in play, and we're going to bring up the Worm now. And as you can see, there were so many different moves and changes in the market during the game that taking $1.66 pre-play was definitely unders. So a great lay opportunity if you wanted to bet pre-play. But that game just had everything, didn't it, Daz?
Yeah, the Dogs finished the first quarter really well and led by, I think, 19 points at quarter time. You mentioned they hit $1.30 in play. It would have been about that time. And then Sydney probably controlled things from there on in, but the Bulldogs just kept hanging in there. It was goal for goal in the last quarter. And yeah, for a game that was 50-50 or the Bulldogs' favourites, $1.66 was definitely too short. And obviously they've won by 2 points, the Swans.
Too short, and they got to a max of $4.20 in play. So you could have backed them obviously higher and laid them low and tried to make a profit no matter what the result happened there. The next one was Melbourne-Brisbane. And yeah. By George, that was an incredible game. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, it was. And Brisbane, I mean, there's always been the rule, I think it was Dermot Brereton that came up with the rule, the first team to 100 invariably wins, and that is logical, but Brisbane breaking that rule, one of the first teams to hit 100 points first in a game and lose, and Melbourne $110 in play. And it was interesting, we had a group conversation, Tommy Haylock, who's been the host of this. I think I said when Melbourne kicked the first 4 goals that anyone being $1.90 against Brisbane at the MCG is like finding money in the street. And then Tom said, don't worry, Brisbane still wins, and was getting into me the rest of the way through. And then obviously Melbourne pinched it on the siren. So it had everything. And I think for Brisbane, if they'd lost that game anywhere, if they'd lost it at the Gabba or they'd been playing it in Alice Springs or something like that against Melbourne, it'd still hurt, but not as much. But I think the fact they lost it at the MCG, given all of the MCG ghosts that they're trying to overcome and the demons, pardon the pun, it hurts them a lot.
A couple of pivotal plays in that game. Jake Melksham was incredible in that last quarter. That 3-on-1 effort where he took almost screamer on a couple of the Brisbane plays and kicked it forward to Cozzy Pickett, who kicked that crucial goal. And then he also had that left foot snap from the boundary line as well before then going on to kick the winning goal, which was no gimme. That was a tough goal from 45, 50 metres out.
Never seen him miss. He kicked a goal either after the siren or on the siren for Essendon against Carlton, I think it was, maybe 7 years ago. But he's a deadly kick for goal, Jake Melksham. I can't recall too many instances where he's missed clutch kicks like that. So, yeah, really, really significant for him.
The other one was Christian Petrarca. I just want to quickly touch on him and what Simon Goodwin's doing with him. There's obviously no Clayton Oliver, but that's not stopping Simon Goodwin from giving Petrarca more forward time. What do you think about that, Daz?
Yeah, and I heard a lot of pundits quite rightly say that that's Melbourne's best chance to win the flag. So the issue for them has been their forward line at times has been dysfunctional, and they've had injuries to tools, like McDonald's been injured, Brown's been in and out of the side. Obviously there's no Wiedemann there anymore. Shaki and Van Rooyen have sort of had little bits of a look from time to time, and they've got a couple of young kids. But Petrarca, a genuine match winner, like when Dusty goes forward for Richmond and kicked 4 against the Saints and was the match winner, and then kicks 4 against Brisbane, and apart from Melksham was probably the match winner again. So yeah, I don't mind that school of thought that Melbourne's best chance of winning big finals would be him doing that.
We could talk about this for hours, but I just want to quickly ask as well, does this affect Petrarca's Brownlow chances, him going forward? Because we know it's a lot harder to be a forward than it is to be a midfielder. So given he will probably see a little bit less of the footy and average less disposals, does that affect his Brownlow chances?
I think he's still getting the ball, obviously not to the same extent, but just looking at his disposals in the last couple of weeks. So he's had 20 and 26 in the last 2 weeks. So he's averaging 23 and kicking 4. We know that umpires don't always notice the influence of forwards as much as mids, but yeah, I still think that on impact, I mean, Gawn was the other player that got a lot of coaches' votes, and Ruckman also don't get a lot of Brownlow votes, so I still think he's a decent chance to get the 3 in that game at least.
One of the most underrated teams in the AFL has to be GWS at the moment. They went over to Adelaide Oval and they beat the Adelaide Crows there, which has been a tough task for a lot of teams. They've just been going great guns at the moment.
They have, obviously. They've now beaten Geelong at Cardinia Park. They've beaten Melbourne on a neutral venue in Alice Springs, and they've beaten Adelaide away, which no one's really done. I think Collingwood's the only team, and Richmond in round 2, that have been able to beat Adelaide at that venue. And for the Crows, the last 2 weeks have been crucial. Obviously, the Essendon loss last week, and then this one does hurt them, given they've got Melbourne, they've got Brisbane away, they've got Port Adelaide, so that it puts a lot of pressure on them. But the Giants, 9 and 8, host the Gold Coast this week, got some winnable games in the run home, and it would be a very unlikely run to the finals, but it's possible. They've been really well coached and really well drilled.
100% does. GWS hit $14 in play in that game before beating the Crows at home.
17 points down at three-quarter time, I think, or thereabouts, which is probably where they were at that price.
That's an incredible performance, and I love seeing the Giants go well. They've still got some very entertaining players. Toby Green, Stephen Caniglio is having a fantastic season. Kelly and a few others, Whitfield. So look forward to continuing to see GWS go well. We're going to go to the Trade Talk Medal. It's our votes on the best players from the week that has just gone. A couple of honourable mentions. Petrarca was absolutely unbelievable. 4 goals and 26 touches. Bontempelli was back to his best. He had a couple of quiet weeks beforehand. He wasn't in any predicted votes. Noah Anderson lifted Gold Coast up at their home ground. Jack Zulfani, how good was he? He got 10 coaches' votes on the weekend, and he was just a player that keeps defying what the footy pundits are trying to say about him, but he's all effort, and you just need those sort of blokes if you're going to feature in finals, and then to round it off, Rioli and Goulden as well. But you got our 3-2-1, Daz.
Yeah, slightly different to obviously guys that wouldn't necessarily get Brownlow votes. Mentioned Max Gawn. There was all that talk around Grundy being left out, and he was the main man against the in-form Oscar McInerney and played a very good game. James Worpel, I mean, the Hawthorn North game was a little bit off-Broadway, but I thought he was excellent in that. And Sam Taylor of the Giants, obviously Adelaide have so much firepower. They score so heavily. He gets 10 coaches' votes out of the game, and to restrict what Adelaide do forward of centre was absolutely crucial to them winning the game. So very rare that a player that plays his role is going to get 3 votes, but we'll give it to him.
Sam Taylor missed a little bit of footy this year with I think a hamstring issue. He's a player that I really, really like, and I'm very glad that we've given him the 3 votes there, because the defenders need their time in the sun as well, and he was absolutely terrific against the Crows. In this week's deep dive, which we're going to get to right now, we're going to look at the most improved players in 2023 and round out our top 5. But let's go through a couple of players that we think have improved out of sight. And Daz, I'll let you kick us off.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I know you're going to touch on Nick Martin probably a little bit later on, but he's had an outstanding season. Wanted to give some kudos to Charlie Ballard at the Gold Coast as well. He's number 2 in the AFL for contested marks this year. Never had a top 10 BNF finish, but he'd be on the cusp of the All-Australian squad, I would think, at the moment, and doing some really good jobs for the Gold Coast Suns. Couple of others that are probably worth a mention would be, I'd say Errol Goulden at Sydney, averaging over 30 possessions. Averaging 27 possessions for the season, but over 30 since round 8. He's kicked 14 goals for the season, so about a goal a game. Ranked 13th for tackles in the AFL as well, Errol Goulden, and he's probably Sydney's best midfielder now with Warner. Wanted to mention Oscar Allen. He's kicked 41 goals in the competition's worst side in West Coast. They've been a distant last. He's ranked 5th in the Coleman, which is a super effort. Kicked a goal in every game. He kicked 28 last year, and he's on track to double that, kick somewhere in the 50 to 60 range. Oscar Allen, which I think, given the troubles that they've had, their midfield's lacking polish, they're not getting a lot of inside 50s, he's not getting a lot of support. That's a great effort. And a lot of talk around, if you look at young players at the Saints, Mitch Owens quite rightly gets kudos, but I reckon since round 7, their best player has been Wanganeen Miller off halfback. He and Sinclair have been pivotal, but Wanganeen Miller averaging nearly 26 possessions a game since round 7. As a second-year player, still a teenager, I think he's been excellent for the Saints.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Daz. Especially Oscar Allen there. He's been incredible in a side that's been very, very poor this year. Look, a couple more. I really like the season of Mason Redmond, and he continues to progress. And although he's not leaping like all the other players, he's certainly averaging a career high in his disposals inside 50s. And I think he's going to have a personal best and fairest voting this year. And he's been a real cornerstone as to why Essendon have improved this year out of sight. And they're looking like they're going to play finals this year after last year they missed out and obviously sacked their coach Ben Rutten. I'm keen to hear from you about Mason Wood. So he's come into his 10th season now, and he's averaging career highs in disposals, contested possessions, 1%ers, which is a metric that I really value, and will almost certainly record a top 10 finish in the BNF for the first time in his career. How have you seen his season?
Yeah, he's had an injury-ravaged career. Obviously at North he was a sort of a medium forward or a third forward. At St Kilda he's become a wingman in that role. Started the year superbly, hurt a shoulder but was able to push through that. He's been really consistent, and it probably goes to show he's nearly 30, but probably the first time his body's let him play every week, and now starting to relish that opportunity and showing how good he can be. So been a really important link man in a St Kilda team that's obviously struggled for consistency.
When did he move to the wing for the first time?
Probably the middle of last year, I would think. It's his third year at the Saints. He played sort of as a half forward early days in 21. But the last 2 years he's been more of a wingman, given they've had guys like Membry and those sorts of players playing as that lead-up forward role.
So you'd have to say it's a bit of a masterstroke from Brett Rutten, and he's really got Mason Wood going. And I think that sort of player is a wingman that I'd like to see more of in the AFL. I'm keen to see other teams try that taller,
the mobile marking wingman who can go forward and kick goals.
One I really would like to touch on is, and I think he's having a fantastic season, he's the Irishman Connor Nash. He's in his 6th season for the Hawks and has reached a level that no one really would have anticipated. He's played all games, 17 games this season. He's averaged 24 touches. And in his previous years, he'd only averaged 15. So that's a pretty significant increase. What have you liked from Connor Nash and watching the Hawks this year?
Yeah, he's another of they've got a few taller midfielders, Hawthorn, and he's been really consistent. As you say, he can do defensive roles and offensive roles, and he's really complemented what they're trying to do. He can go forward and score as well. So, and those tackle numbers as well. I think Hawthorn's midfield is hard to play against in that they're physical and that they can compete, and I think that's what's seen them probably improve as the year's gone on to the stage now where they're competitive every time they play.
Yeah, I think for a young side, having a tackling beast, which he's leading the Hawks for tackles this year, is really, really important. The last one we're going to touch on is Nick Martin from the Essendon Football Club. It's his 2nd season at the Bombers. And given he's only in his 2nd season, he obviously started off on debut. He had that 5-goal, 27 disposal game. And second-year blues, I think, is definitely a thing, but he's obviously come in as a more mature player, and he's shown absolutely no signs of slowing down, Daz. Yeah,
his disposal average is slightly up on last year, tackle numbers slightly up, contested possessions well up, also still hitting the scoreboard as well. He's regularly getting sort of 20, 25 and kicking a goal. Tackle count pretty good. He's sort of working both ways. So yeah, he's been really consistent. And you mentioned second year blues. It's a real thing. It does happen quite a lot with players that their second year just tapers a little bit. But yeah, he's very much been the exception to that and been crucial to Essendon's improvement. One thing that really stands out for me as well is that he's really in score involvement and definitely has a crack at goal assists. He's leading Essendon in goal assists with 19 for the year, and he's ranked 4th in the AFL there. So Nick Martin, another Bomber who's having a fantastic season. And it's no wonder that Essendon are climbing the ladder and having a great year off the back of some of their improved performances from individuals this season. Daz, we're going to head to the Brownlow Medal predictor.
And gosh, it looks like a race of three still at the top. And then we've sort of seen Tim Taranto come in and have another predicted vote this week. But Nick Dacos leading the way with 30 predicted votes. Christian Petrarca second with 25. Lachie Neale third with 22.5. Tim Taranto with 21. And Marcus Bontempelli there with 20.5. What do you think about the odds connected with the predicted votes there, Daz? Anything?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the Friday night matchup, or Thursday night matchup between, might have been Friday, Melbourne and Brisbane, where Petrarca and Neale, who got votes out of that game, would significantly swing it. So Neale, not predicted to get votes, drifts from 14s out to 18.50. The Petrarca watch is interesting. A possible three-voter, and watching that live, he went in from about 6s to 480 or thereabouts, but then Nick Dacos the next day, almost best on ground and a chance for three votes, eases Petrarca back out again to sort of 640-ish. So he ends up not moving, and Dacos still hovering around the $1.60 mark. So Lachie Neale drifted, but again, his market has been really reactive all season, Lachie Neale. But yeah, Petrarca, I still think there's a chance. I mean, the predictor has the gap between Petrarca and Dacos at being 5. I think there's a chance that it's closer than that or almost level. So $1.60 versus $6.40. I know which way I'd go with that.
While there's absolutely no chance that Patrick Cripps will win the Brownlow Medal, he's definitely
on the move,
late.
yeah.
But in his last 4 games, which Carlton have won all those games, he's predicted to have 2.5 votes, 2 votes, 1 vote, and another 2.5 votes from his recent win on the weekend against Port. So he's certainly a player in form. Out of those, I find it interesting that Marcus Bontempelli just won't go away.
No.
In terms of his predicted voting, I mean, he's there on 20.5 predicted votes, but he's still $11 on the exchange, Daz.
Yeah, he is. And the Bulldogs have got a lot of 50-50 finals-defining games in the run home. They play Essendon, they play Richmond, they play the Giants, they play Geelong. They've got all of those games that are between finals contenders, effectively. So if the Bulldogs make the 8, it's probably going to be on the back of someone like him dragging them there. So you wouldn't discount him picking up a few more along the way.
Yeah, that's right, Daz, definitely. Well, we're going to go to our buy, hold and sell segment where we're going to touch on some of those points there, but I'll let you kick it off, Daz. Who are you buying this week?
I know they're short and they are the favourite, but I struggle to see Collingwood not winning it, to be honest. I know the predictor has them at about $1.90. They're $2.90. That's still short for a premiership favourite at this stage of the season, but question marks on Brisbane's ability to beat them at the MCG. Question marks on Port Adelaide's ability to beat them at the MCG. They lost to Collingwood by 10 goals earlier in the year. We actually see those sides play each other obviously now, and that'll be a ripping contest over in Adelaide. And probably question marks on Melbourne's ability to score. Obviously there's a sleeper on Geelong. I'm not saying that Port, Brisbane and Melbourne can't win it, but I think Collingwood are significantly ahead of those 3 sides at the moment. So yeah, I can't find a reason not to back the Pies.
That's right, Daz. Well, I'm going to be buying Carlton for the top 8 this week. And I know Carlton featured heavily in our betting strategies earlier in the year. We were laying them for the top 8 and then they drifted and we wanted to back them. They drifted again. We wanted to back them again. And they didn't quite give us that show of confidence and start winning games. And it wasn't until just before the bye they won that first game. To start their 4 wins in a row on the trot. They're playing the cellar dwellers, the Eagles, this week, who they beat earlier in the year by 100+ points. The last time they played them in Perth, they're going to play them at Marvel Stadium this week. I just think if Carlton can score another big win, the market will react heavily to that and they'll shorten again. Probably allows punters to potentially lay them after they play Collingwood because probably they're doubtful to win that game. But yeah, I think buying Carlton right now before they play the Eagles and shorten in the top 8 market is probably a good move, Daz.
And then sets up a blockbuster of the century against Collingwood a week later. I'm holding on Will Ashcroft for the Rising Star only because the odds are starting to become a bit more prohibitive. In that 3 or 4 horse race, he's into $1.50. And then you've got the likes of Sheasel at 6s and Mitch Owens at 7s and the like. So I still think with 5 or 6 games to go, I mean, Sheasel had 30 again on the weekend. If Owens has a day where he kicks 3 or 4, I still think that can be a closer run thing than it is.
Yep, nice, Daz. Well, I've actually got a double buy this week. I'm going up full steam ahead. My other buy is Lachie Neale, we spoke about how he's drifted in the market, and that's obviously off the back of not getting votes against Melbourne at the MCG. But if you look at some of the teams that Brisbane play in their run home, it seems to me that they're going to start favourite in 5 of their last 6 games. The only team that they won't start favourite against is Collingwood, which is more than fair enough. But if you're starting favourite against a team and you're likely to win, then you're probably also likely to get votes.
And the Collingwood games at Marvel, where they're far more likely to win than if it was at the G.
And that's the next point I was going to make, Daz. So Lachie Neale's record at Marvel Stadium has been pretty good. So he's $18 now. I think that should be closer to single figures.
Definitely.
So I'm happy to buy him. Probably on a lesser note, I'm still happy to buy Christian Petrarca. I think I'm going to go straight into my sell now because they're related. But I'm going to sell Nick Dacos because he's incredibly short to win the Brownlow Medal. I'm keen to go look back and see when a player has been this short to win the medal. Look, at the moment, he's just allowed to do whatever he wants on a football field, and that's shown in his last 4 games. He's had best on ground in almost each of those games. They've got Port Adelaide this week and then Carlton the week after, who we know they'll probably tag him. So, look, I'm looking at the next couple of weeks, potentially Nick Dacos is going to go down on performance if he is tagged. And then that would see him drift slightly in the Brownlow Medal race. But yeah, $1.60 or $1.65 currently now is way too short. And I think Christian Petrarca is much closer than what people think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Lachie Neale's been over the odds all year, really, and remains so. And probably a similar line of thinking. I'm selling Tex for the Coleman. I think, according to the odds, it's down to a 2-horse race, and obviously Adelaide, their draw's reasonably tricky in the run home. He's played well at the MCG, where he kicked 5 a couple of weeks ago against Collingwood, and that's where they go again this week. But you look at Charlie Curnow, who's favourite. He's just lost his partner in crime in Harry Mackay for a while, which means that he becomes the sole focus, and he's usually handled that pretty well. So, I think if you're looking at it as a 2-horse race, I think Charlie would be a few lengths ahead in that race at present.
Charlie Curnow also loves playing at Marvel Stadium. And
he could fill the boots this week. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Daz. He had a bag, 9 goals against West Coast last time they played there. We're going to get to our trading strategies. Daz, what are you going to have a look at this week?
I think there's a couple of head-to-head matchups. Like last week, we sort of thought Melbourne represented good value. I also thought Essendon did too, and that didn't work. But they got a bit of a touch-up at the hands of the Cats. But I think a couple of sides that represent good value this week. One of those is GWS at $1.48 at home against the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast had that new coach bounce, but I wonder whether they do that a second week in a row on the road. So I think the $1.48 is not bad on GWS there. Adelaide played well at the MCG last time, so it is a cautious one, but I still think Melbourne at home at about $1.40 represents reasonable value in that as well. And maybe even Richmond at $1.40 against Hawthorn. I think not a bad price on those 3 favourites.
I'll be looking towards Charlie Curnow in the disposal markets. I think 15 plus disposals is fair. He probably, you'd think, would have a bit of a fill-up against West Coast, given they're down on their defenders at the moment, and obviously he plays very well at Marvel Stadium, so I'm going to have a look at Charlie Curnow at 15 plus disposals. You're probably going to get $5 or $6 for that one, so looking forward to having a look at those markets when they come out. The other ones from my buy, hold and sell, I'm still keen on Christian Petrarca and Lachie Neale. And to a lesser extent, probably Carlton, more so buying them without putting the money onto the exchange, given we've got bets already live for that one. But yeah, there's a couple for you, Dad.
Yeah, and look, West Coast have started to be a bit more competitive at home. Their last few home games against Essendon, St Kilda and Richmond, they've been all right, but they haven't done that on the road. Obviously, they got flogged by Brisbane, flogged by Sydney, flogged by Adelaide. So you do hold fears for them at Marvel against Carlton. They just haven't been able to get it right away from home. So if Charlie kicks 9 in Perth, I shudder to think that he might get a few this week, I would imagine.
Plenty of sport happening. We've obviously got the next Ashes game coming up, the Women's World Cup. Plenty of happening, obviously AFL as well. So make sure you head to the Betfair Hub for our trading tips and more.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.